Hello, welcome to Catholic Life, ordinary people with extraordinary faith. I'm Deacon Jodi. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a very interesting show. We're going to talk about astrophotography. And one of my good friends, Sean Molony, is here. He was on once before to show us some of his pictures. And boy, what a boneheaded comment I made calling you an astrologer, huh?
Well, it's a lot different than being a photographer.
Yeah, and astronomy and all this other stuff, that's science, and astrology is that crazy stuff that people do.
Fortune telling.
But we're talking about being a photographer, and you were a photographer and for a long time.
Yeah, I spent a long time in that career. I did a lot of commercial photography, worked in labs. I actually worked for Fonville Wine for a good period of time, and didn't make any money, but I certainly enjoyed being around and listening to the stories and printing for him.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome. So what we're talking about today is the heavens,
Yeah.
the stars, the magnificence of God's creation. And the way you approach it is through the lens,
Right.
through photography. Tell us a little bit about how that all came about and how you came to do it.
I always wanted to shoot that kind of photography, but I didn't really know what was entailed or what it took to do it. But I actually went out in my front yard about 7 years ago and took my tripod and a camera and a lens and Orion, which is up right now, which is that's like everybody's first target because it's a bright nebula. I went out there and tried to shoot Orion, and I worked at it for 3 or 4 days, and finally I got it. And it was just a teeny tiny little thing on my screen, but when I saw it, that was it. I was hooked. And then I went down the rabbit hole. And then I started reading and learning and spent hundreds of hours on YouTube watching other astrophotographers and finding out about the equipment and what it takes to shoot this stuff, because the Earth's spinning, it's moving around the sun, so you got to, take that in consideration when you're shooting your images, because everything we shoot is very long exposures. My typical exposure is 20 minutes. So I'll shoot 21 or 27 of those images and then stack all of that into one image. So you can't be off,
Right.
by any amount. Otherwise your stars will streak and it won't be right.
So our viewers are going to be able to see some of these pictures that you've developed, and pictures is really not a fair word. It's
Photos, yeah.
It's photographs that are just magnificent.
My website is www.redstickastro.com.
Redstickastro.com.
Yeah,
and so you can go there and you can see some of this.
I have a gallery, and you can go in there and look at my images. I actually had to put a page to explain what red stick was. People didn't understand, so I had to go into the whole idea of about why we
Baton
call
Rouge.
it. Yeah. So I thought it was kind of fun, to make it red stick, and then astrophotography.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you get into this this new way of looking at the stars through the lenses, and obviously it's created in you a whole new appreciation.
It's a passion
for the stars.
Yeah, it once I learned how to shoot it, and once I learned how to process it and create those images, when I saw pictures of the people that I'd become friends with online, I have all these friends all over the world that were best of friends, and I've never even looked them in the eye or shaken their hand because everything's been online. But they were creating these gorgeous images, and I'm going to do that. I was bent on it. I was going to learn it, and it's a very steep learning curve to learn this hobby. But I almost tell people it shouldn't be called a hobby. I should get some sort of acknowledgement in astrophysics or something, because of just learning to learn the sky, to learn the stars. But now when I walk outside, I don't see the sky like I used to see it. I see it in 3 dimensions. I see the stars and know what they are. I know what their names are. I know how far they are away. And it's just a completely, and then when you see the magnificence of these gorgeous nebulas out there, and they really are the cycle of life when they, and we can get into that whenever you want, but they're
right. So let me just, you told me something when we were talking in advance of this about that we're seeing stars now who they sent their light to Earth when Christ was alive.
Yeah.
That is mind-boggling.
Right. The Orion is about 1,300 light years from Earth. So that means that basically when you look at the sky, you're looking at the past. Same thing that Hubble's doing, which is why they're launching the Webb scope, which is going to go up soon. But so let's just take Orion, for instance. It's 1,300 light years from Earth, which means that the light that you're seeing of that nebula left 1,300 years ago. So if that nebula were to just disappear right now, just gone from everything, you would be able to go out in your yard for the next 1,300 years and continue to shoot pictures of it until it finally disappeared, because that's how long it takes for that light to travel. So when you find a target that's, say, 2,000 or more light years from Earth, the amount of time it takes for light to travel in 1 year, then you find a 2,000 light year target, then yeah, you're looking at a nebula that was when Jesus was here.
That is just mind-boggling.
That I love it.
I mean, you just think about the expansiveness of that, you know, just in sheer almost unreality, but it is the true reality.
Yeah, the distances it was kind of the first thing that really got me going. You know, like the Earth is spinning at I think about 1,000 miles an hour. You know, we're spinning in a circle, and then it's going around the sun at 42,000 miles an hour, and then it's spinning around the galaxy, and it takes X amount of years for it to go all the way in one circle. But when you look at the stars and you're looking at these targets, the distances, people don't understand just how far. Like you look at Saturn, you saw this thing the other day where Saturn passed behind Jupiter, and everybody was calling it the Bethlehem star and stuff. And Saturn looks like this little teeny, planet, and Jupiter is all bright. But Saturn is massive, and I forget the number, like in Jupiter, I forget how many hundreds of Earths would fit in the circumference of Jupiter. Those gas planets are out there, and they are gigantic. But because of the distance that they are away, they look smaller. So Saturn looks like you look at Jupiter, and you look at Saturn, and you think, oh, well, Saturn's just a teeny thing. No, it's not. It's just further away.
Oh, wow. So that's one little lesson to glean from this, and that is when something looks small, it's further away.
Yeah, that's a good way to teach your kids. It may not be true on everything, but it's a great way to start. You can look at the sky and say, okay, the brighter ones are closer, the dimmer, the little tiny ones are further away. So try to get that perspective so that when you're looking at it, and then if you look at it long enough, you can start to see that distance between them.
Right.
Like when you look at the Big Dipper, everybody thinks it's just this little ladle up there in the sky, but actually the stars are at all different,
right.
distances, but they look like a ladle,
right.
but they're completely have totally different distances between them.
Right. So there's what I'm getting from this is there's several layers of understanding when you're talking about the heavens, astro, and then photography. So the first part is knowing about the sky and knowing about the stars and the planets
right.
and what's up there, And the second part is photography. So you have to blend both of those parts together. So for you, did the first part come learning the sky, or did the first part come learning the equipment you were going to need?
Probably the equipment. I remember when I first started, and I would talk to people on the web, and they would just rattle off names. Oh, that's a great shot of the tadpole. That's a great shot of NGC 7822. I'm like, how do they know all this stuff? I mean, how do you, and now I can, because of the years doing it, I know all the names and stuff. But no, the equipment, like I said in the early part of this, is that the learning curve is steep, because you have to learn multiple softwares. And don't let me scare people away. I'm going to back up on that in a second. But you have to learn, if you want to get into serious deep sky photography and create really nice images like I'm trying to do, you need to learn about tracking. You need to learn about all of the things that go into creating this image, because they're so far away that you have to, I keep all of my images within 50 pixels of one another. But that doesn't mean that a person can't go out and shoot really neat images with their cell phone. They make these cool little brackets that you can buy that mount on your tripod, and you can mount them in front of a little telescope, a little wide field telescope, and actually shoot really neat photographs with your phone. So this little rig right here is, I call it my travel rig, because it breaks down and I have a backpack that it all fits into, and then I can go travel around and shoot with it. My main rig weighs 200-something pounds. But it just depends on how far you want to go and how far you want to take it. But you could begin with whatever you have in your closet. Take your camera out, take your tripod out, and go shoot a 15-second image and do a bunch of them. And they have lots of free software that you can get off the internet that will stack your images for you, that will track your sky for you, that will do all of that for you.
So the important thing for this show is for us to let our audience understand that God created the sky. That God is, when you look at the sky and you look at how big it is, and big is not even the right word.
Genesis takes on a whole new meaning when you start shooting.
Yeah, all of a sudden you look at the scriptures and you get a whole new realization of what God really is, how big, and it's the wrong word, God is.
Yeah, it's for me, it's a prayer, because you don't go out there and just snap an image. So I'll sit for 20 minutes waiting for an image to come in, and really the fun is when you're shooting a new target, and you haven't seen one yet, and I'll go out there and I'll wait, and I'm sitting under the stars, and it's calm, and it's like a meditation. And then that image pops up, and you go, wow, look at that, and here I am to observe this, and this thing traveled, some of my stuff is 26 million light years away, so that's how far away that galaxy is. Like the Whirlpool galaxy, I think, is 26 million light years away, and all of a sudden, there it is, and I'm like, God created all of this for us, and people don't get to see it. And back in the old days, imagine what it looked like before all this technology, before all the lights, and why people look to the stars so much for God.
Well, let's take a short break and come back and answer that question. Why do people look at the stars to look for God? That's a very interesting question, and we're going to talk about that when we come back. We're talking to Sean Molony, a good friend of mine, an astro-photographer, and one of those special Christians that have extraordinary faith. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Dina Dow. Have you ever thought about how near to us God is? How truly present He is in each breath, in every moment. God is near us. If this is true, how can we grow in our awareness of God and coming to know, to love, and to serve Him and answer our call to holiness? The deeper we grow in our faith, the greater we grow in our hope of Jesus Christ and become witnesses of His love. We are called to be living missionary disciples of our Lord Jesus. We encounter the Lord, we accompany other people on their journey, we form a community of believers, and we are sent to share the good news in our missionary activity. As director of the Office of Evangelization and Catechesis, we are here to help you grow to become a living missionary disciple at home, at school, in the community, in your churches, and in the entire world. We offer workshops and courses, ministry and theology classes that help answer the call to evangelize and to catechize. So let us answer together the command of the Great Commission to go out and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them all that Jesus has commanded us, and know that God is with us until the end of the age.
Welcome back to Catholic Life, ordinary people with extraordinary faith. We're talking about the heavens today. We're talking about the stars. We're talking about the magnificence of God's creation. And a good friend of mine, Sean Molony, who I've been knowing forever from the cathedral days. Yeah. And 7 years ago, you got into a new venture, and it's really created a lot of joy for a lot of people that get to see those.
For me at this point.
Yeah. What you've created for people is the chance to take a peek into the heavens.
It's right above your head. I tell people that all the time. When they see my pictures, I said, it's right above your head every night.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah, but we can't see it without
No, you got to have. But that brings me back to an earlier point, and I know that this kind of stuff looks impressive, and the first thing people think is, oh, that's expensive, and here we are in a time I can't afford that kind of thing. But you can, and I'm going to start doing videos to teach people on my website how to use what you've got. You don't need to spend buckets of money to capture images. You go dust off that old DSLR you got in your closet, or you could even, like I said earlier, you could use your phone. They have brackets for $25 you can buy, things. There's ways to do this and get images without having to spend. It just depends on how far you want to take it.
Right. So before we get into, I do want to get into the spiritual dimension of this, but I'd be remiss if we didn't just for a second talk about the equipment. You have your travel rig here, and what you were explaining to me is that the camera sits on top of a mount that has the ability to compensate for the movement of the Earth around the sun and spinning.
The spinning of the Earth and going around the sun.
And so it compensates so that when you lock into a star, it's not moving on you.
Yeah,
right?
well, basically you've got your telescope, you got your camera, and you've got a guide scope. And what the guide scope does is it looks at a star, and the mount itself will track. This is just a very simplified version of what I have, but this mount, what it does is it'll track the sky on its own. So for visual, if you just wanted to put an eyepiece in and just watch things, then it'll keep your target in the middle of your lens all night long. But if you want to photograph it, then you need to be able to shoot exposures that are much longer. So you need a way to keep that scope pointed at your target for 3-4 minutes at a time for something like this size unit. So I use what's called a guide scope. And what the guide scope does is it looks at a star and it sends corrections to the mount.
Right.
And it basically says, oh, go right, go left, go up, go down, go right, go left, go up. And it's programmable in the software of how much I want to track it. So I have mine set to 50 pixels. So I want to make sure that the scope is always within 50 pixels of my target. So I get sharp, round stars.
Okay, so I know this sounds a little complicated, and it may seem that way to some of us that aren't real familiar with it, but you can learn more about it by going to your website, Red Stick Astro.
There's a lot of formulas. I forget the formula of 4 or whatever, but basically you take the size of your camera lens. This is just basically a camera lens is all it is. Mm-hmm. Take your camera lens and I'll put it on my website, but it divides it, tells you how long you can shoot it for, so maybe 10, 15 seconds. So you just take your camera and put it on a tripod, point it at Orion, and you've got 15 seconds with that particular lens to shoot it before the stars start to drift. So you just shoot a whole bunch of exposures at that time, and then once you gather up a bunch of them, we stack them all together with Deep Sky Stacker software, which is free, and make an image.
And then we can see through the photograph a representation of the magnificence of God's creation.
And here's the really neat thing that I learned just in the last 2 years. When a star uses up all of its energy, so it's basically feeding off of itself. And then once it uses up its energy, it goes into what's called supernova, and it explodes. And that's what creates these beautiful nebula. And then within those nebula, they have star-creating areas where they're taking all of the gold and all the types of chemicals from the periodic table that have just been blown out into space, and they're creating new stars, new planets. So it's the cycle of life. So a star is born, the star goes through its life, it explodes, it creates new stars, new planets. Hopefully one day we find new life. Who knows, but that's the cycle. And that's God's plan. I mean, you look at us on this little tiny earth and how our cycle works, to create babies and keep our life forms going, keep the human race going. It's the same thing out in space. And so God just did it on a bigger, grander scale than what we're getting here on earth.
Right. And the thing that intrigues me about this is, when I was in high school and I took physics, we actually went out to the lakefront in New Orleans and looked at the stars. And we had little telescopes, and the teacher was trying to explain to us about how the stars came into existence, because it was a Catholic school, how the stars came into existence and God made the stars. And that was just a realization for me that was magnificent. Just that little glimpse, okay? And so to start, somebody can start with that glimpse and say, look, if you want to know the magnificence of God, go out to the observatory and look up at the sky.
Right there on Highland Road.
And look up at the sky. Bring a telescope,
Or go out into an area that you could go to the, just go on Google and type in light pollution map, and it'll give you a map of the country, and you can zero in on Louisiana, and it shows you where the dark areas are. That there's not so much light pollution from the city lights. And it's incredible what you can see. That during the summertime, you can see the entire Milky Way. When you see that big line that everybody shoots pictures of the Milky Way, that's the center of our galaxy. That's where the black hole is, and that's the band. We're in a spiral galaxy, and that's the center of our galaxy passing by. And just, it is no better prayer to me than to sit outside at night, and not only do I get to shoot these great images, but I'll sit out with a pair of binoculars, and you'd be amazed what you can see just in Baton Rouge with a pair of binoculars that your eyes can't see. And the creation that God created for us is it's so big that it's almost to a point where
you can't hardly believe it.
Yeah, you can't. It's too much for your brain to even try to. To put it into put it into some sort of order.
So, from a spiritual perspective, we have Genesis, and it says God created the heavens. And if He did, He put the circle of life, as you called it, with the stars. Living out their existence and blowing up and starting over again. He put all that in motion. And
I didn't know any of that. I didn't realize. I just thought stars were out there, and I didn't realize that this cycle was taking place. And once I learned about it, and I said, "Well, that's the same thing that's happening here on Earth. That's the same cycle of life that we have here. Right. So there's a grand plan in all of this, and I'm just beginning to touch into it, but it makes you feel." A lot of people say, "Oh, don't you feel so small?" I said, "No, I feel special."
Yeah.
Because God took the time to look at us. When I see the size of this universe and I see what we're shooting in that, He took the time to come here.
Yeah, He took the time to become one of us.
Yeah.
That tells you how special we are in relation to the magnificence of what's out there.
And once you get an understanding of the distances, and you see how really, really big it really is, and then you go to that thought that He took the time to come here and be with us. That's huge. What does that say for us?
And think about what it says about eternal life.
Yeah.
About how much of a big deal that is.
Right.
If we're just this little part of this, and God lives in the heavenly realm, which is more expansive than what we're seeing.
A lot of people used to come to me and they said, "Well, does that now, you're getting off on all this science and all of this stuff, does that change your belief system, with your Catholicism and your belief in God?" I said, "No, it strengthens it."
Right. People don't even realize that most of this astronomy, the science of astro, was started with the clergy.
Right.
Jesuits and the priests, and
Thank God for those Jesuits.
So
Speaking of, I go to Manresa every year, and every night around 10 o'clock when everybody's disappearing off the bed, I take this little rig and I go across the street, and because the Milky Way's up, because I go at the time of year when it's up, and I go shoot. And it's quiet, nobody's talking to you, nobody bothers you, and I just go out there and just, it's my meditation time, it's my prayer time.
Yeah, and what a great way to blend the human reality of life with the spiritual reality of God.
Yeah.
It's where the two can come together, and we can, for a second, get a glimpse of what God is like. It's just magnificent, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, and it's hard to put into words. And I get a lot of questions because you are bridging the scientific gap. And I try to tell people that science and our faith, they work together so well. And if you just look at it the correct way. And when you start looking at these beautiful things that he created up there, and you start thinking about the science behind it, but then you start looking at it, that God created it, and you getting an understanding of just what really is going on up there, they marry together wonderfully.
Right.
That they don't need to be in conflict with one another. They both can work together.
And they do.
They do.
And that's the
Yeah.
One of the things you told me, we have about a minute left, I want to talk about inspiring our youth, if you have children or grandchildren, to take an interest in the stars, in what's up there, because that's important. And you're going to hopefully be able to share this with people at schools and stuff.
My plan right now is, and I've talked to a few people, is I would like to get a chance to be able to go into the schools and start teaching the children about things, bringing in some things that they can see and put their hands on, and then maybe even like take them out to the observatory one night and let them shoot some pictures, or even just look through telescopes. Now, we used to do a thing at the planetarium where we would go to the mall and everybody bring their scopes, and we would go out there to the mall by the fountain and let the kids, and you'd be surprised, the adults were the ones that were really flipping out when they'd see the craters on the moon. But yeah, I want to, my plan is to start creating more and more videos on redstickastro.com, and then to try to go in and start teaching the kids and open up their minds, because with what Elon Musk is doing with the Mars thing and all the new things that we've got going, that's our destiny, is in space.
Well, that is certainly our destiny. I want to thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
And I hope that this has inspired you to look more into what's up there in the heavens. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, God bless everyone.